and you could hear the journalist's wheels start clicking, like, uh-oh, maybe there's something here. The journalist was like, well, let me investigate. Journalist calls Morgan Stanley, okay, one of the biggest investment banks in the world, talks to their global head of PR and says, is it true, they asked, is it true you're blocking access to littlevault.com, you know? And we were little, we were insignificant, we were not even on radars. VCs didn't want to have anything to do with us. And instead of saying nothing or no comment, they said in a very paternalistic way, very non-maverick way, they said, yes it is. We don't consider Vault a productive use of our employees' time. And then that was the shot. Once it was printed in the Wall Street Journal, that was the shot heard around the world. Suddenly every news outlet was covering this David versus Goliath story. And then what did I do? I took the bitch about your boss truck and I sent it to the front door of Morgan Stanley. And then news crews came down, the war at Morgan Stanley, and they were interviewing Morgan, how do you feel about being blocked from Vault.com? And it was beautiful, and it really got us on the radar map, and it resonated, and it had a bit of that maverick spice to it, but without undermining our credibility. And I say that, you know, when I talk to startups or when I talk at conferences about startups, I say, you know, you have to think about cutting through the clutter. And Petite Sirah has come such an amazing way after 50 years. And it can, I think, you know, in my book I focus on the wine types that are just below the mainstream, those cool functional alternatives. And I think Petite Sirah, because of its inherent quality and because of the great work so many of your wineries are doing, has the ability to resonate in people's minds. But at this time, maybe, you know, you all know about it, in California it's better known, but my mom and my sister, it's not on their lips yet. It's not, you know, dinner table conversation yet. It's not like, oh, I've heard of that before, I need to order that instead of the Malbec. So certain things, first of all, if you've seen the chapter, I did label it Petite Sirah, dark and intense as a dominatrix boot. Now, I don't think you want to go that direction, but with my book, I was trying to underscore the dark, plummy charms of Petite Sirah. But I think there is this kind of bold and feisty messaging you can run with for Petite Sirah that would take the casual drinker, let's say on the East Coast. You know, I've heard of that. And there's this campaign going on that I find really interesting, and that little extra, those little inches of marketing recognition can be enough to kind of tip things so that that will be the next Malbec, or that will be the next even Pinot Noir. So, I mean, one idea I had, and I like being very specific, is to take the great P.S. I Love You campaign that Joe and others have promoted, and you know, there's something about the heart and something about the affection surrounding that phrase, I love you. I mean, you might even consider a symbol, like the heart symbol, for those in this organization producing Petite Sirah. You might even consider, you know, putting a little heart symbol on your bottle to show the unification, and also it has the kind of secondary value of reminding people that red wine is good for the heart. So it kind of works on that unconscious level too. But you know, a lot of organizations surrounding grapes and regions aren't as proud, as zealous, as unified or organized as you are. There are a lot of these grape types and regions that are kind of free-floating out there. So what's interesting about what you have is you already have this, you have Joe and you already have this great traction. So there are opportunities to take it a little bit further. Another idea would be to, you know, play on the confusion that surrounds wine, and especially the term Petite Sirah. I mean, I say in my book, you know, I think there's a secret society out there to confuse wine drinkers. I look at things from the casual wine drinker's point of view. That's kind of my bailiwick. Like, I see myself as a conduit between the pros to everyone else. I really like giving people what I say easily implementable nuggets of information and then cut away a lot of the BS. And what I see, whether it's when I teach at Aspen or South Beach or in my own classes in New York, is people are constantly confused. Wine is full, as you know, of contradictions. What does reserve mean? Well, it usually means the better wine, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. In Champagne, extra dry means a little bit sweeter than brut. I mean, there are all these reversals that really, really freak people out. And Petite Sirah, you've seen it, you know it, people who come to your tasting rooms, they're, oh yeah, that's like a smaller version of the Syrah grape. It's less bold, and you know, I think you could turn that vice into a virtue by playing with that a little bit. One phrase I was thinking about on the airplane is, you know, it's not the size of the berry in the wine, but the size of the wine in the berry. You know, the idea that, or you know, who you calling petite? You know, the idea that it's a virtue to have that in your name, and you can turn it around and kind of remind people that you are this big, plummy, barbecue-ready, peppery, spicy, delicious, I'll say uniquely American. I know it's grown elsewhere, but you know, all these things surrounding it, you know, I would even see, like, so you have wine stores do taste-offs. I've seen this before a little bit, but you could really blow it out between Syrah and Petite Sirah, like a Coke Pepsi taste test. And that would actually promote both grapes, and it would be a fun thing to do. Can you taste a difference between the two? Just the process of doing that, and doing that in New York, and in Boston, in Washington, D.C., and in San Francisco, could really raise the level and raise the recognition. One third kind of idea to build on the great effort so far is that pioneer focus. You know, at Jim's birthday celebration last night, I thought about, you know, how great is that? You know, 50 years ago, Jim took a chance on this maverick grape. You know, in this world where we don't take a lot of chances, I talk about in my book how, you know, wine drinkers like to cling to the coastline of familiarity. The Merlot, the Pinot Noir, the Chardonnay, the Pinot Grigio, which are great grapes. But now with this brave new world of wine choice out there, it's kind of foolish to only be there. And there's also this, you know, Petite Sirah is kind of the pioneer grape, both because the people who've adopted it, both early on and all the people continuing to adopt it, are pioneers. They are doing something a little bit different. They're not just playing for the pure economic return, but they're doing it out of the love of it. And then, so not only are the winemakers, the vintners, the marketers, the pioneers, but you know, by being the pioneer grape, you are also kind of complementing your drinkers, your consumers. Because again, I think one of the big trends I'm seeing out there, and again, often in the big urban areas, is the propensity towards experimentation, propensity towards adventure. More, you know, it's funny, the motivation, one of the big motivations for kind of writing a book about these slightly lesser known grapes, not arcane grapes, not obscure grapes, but slightly lesser known, is watching what's happening in food. I remember growing up, you know, spaghetti marinara was basically Del Monte tomato sauce poured on Muller's spaghetti. You know, now people can actually pronounce the name Chipotle. You know, the gastronomic sophistication in all corners of the USA, at least, has really risen. You could go to ballparks and order sushi and order panini. There's really kind of a rumbling happening due to the Food Network, due to the cult of celebrity chefs like Rachel Ray, due to the internet, bloggers, and just more information in general out there. And I think this, first you saw the wave, the increasing gastronomic sophistication, culinary sophistication in these kind of recognition of more gourmet types. I mean, the fact that people are even talking about panini now. I was in Las Vegas a couple weeks ago. There were 3 types of hummus in the salad bars, you know, the big all-American salad bars in Las Vegas. That wouldn't have happened 10 years ago. There's this comfort, this willingness to experiment out there in America. And Petite Sirah could be on the cutting edge of the wine version of that, because that's coming. You know, it's like wine kind of lags a little bit behind because it has its own, you know, it's alcohol. Some people still perceive it as snooty, but it's all part of that gastronomic experience. So by playing up the pioneer value of Petite Sirah, not only among you guys as pioneers, but actually as the drinker, as the pioneer, the adventurer, the person willing to that, you know, kind of take that nervous moment at the table that I feel all the time in restaurants, especially in New York restaurants. Well, let's see, I'm going to cling with what's familiar because I don't want to make a mistake at $30 or $40 in a restaurant. But increasingly, they're feeling empowered, and by kind of playing on the pioneer angle, you are actually complimenting them and reminding them that wine can be part of this brave new world of experimentation. So that's pretty much what I wanted to tell you about. I also, again, about messaging and making wine fun, I just spoke at the Aspen Food and Wine, and each of you, I have extras if you didn't get it, each of you have, I got these made at a legitimate hotel supply store, and it plays on the brave new world of wine idea, do not disturb, I'm drinking bravely. And then the back, which kind of has a double meaning, bravely drunk, but I mean it, wine is best when it's bravely drunk. Not as a imperative to get bravely drunk. But anyway, these were in high demand in Aspen, and I had some extra, so each of you should leave here with one. How am I doing on time? 5 minutes? You want to hear a story? Yeah. Okay. All right, so I gave you my ideas about Petite Sirah, a grape that I love. Now I'm just going to give you an entertaining story about me and criminal court. How a couple months ago I had to go to criminal court. Here I am, a wine writer, written 2 books. I'm now writing the food blog for, or the wine blog for the Food Network. You know, I take my craft very seriously, but I actually had a date with a judge because of wine. This is an incredible story. It hasn't come out yet, so you're kind of the first to hear it. A couple months ago, a friend of mine's getting married in New York, and he loves wine, and he had this like bachelor dinner at Colicchio and Sons, Tom Colicchio's restaurant, one of his restaurants, and he had amazing old bottles, and like 7 of us, you know, eight guys there. And one of the bottles was a 1970 Chateau Palmer Bordeaux. And it tasted so good, but then the label was great. So after they decanted it, the sediment was in the bottle, the sommelier kind of lined up the bottles, and we were all feeling happy and good. And as we were leaving the restaurant, I saw the empty bottle of the Palmer, and I'm like, wouldn't this make a great dead soldier? Wouldn't this be a wonderful bottle to keep as a souvenir? So I grabbed it right as we were leaving the restaurant, the empty bottle with a little bit of sediment wash in it. And this was in November. This is when it all started, in November. And I walk into the crosswalk on 10th Avenue, and within 8 seconds, I hear, "Woo!" And I'm like, and they're like, over there, stand over there. And it's a squad car. And I'm like, but, what? And by the way, all my friends ran ahead because I have those kind of friends. And they all ran away, scattered, and the cops were like, what's in the bottle? It's 11:30 Saturday night. And I have a suit on, I even have a tie, out of respect to my friend. And I'm like, nothing, I'm just taking it as a souvenir. It was a great bottle of wine. They're like, let's see. Pulls out, sees the bottle, and sees the little bit of sediment wash in there, undrinkable. And they're like, well, it still has wine in it. And they start writing me up for an open container summons. And that is a mandatory criminal court appearance in New York City. Whether you like it or not, you have to go to criminal court, and even if you're pleading guilty. So one of my friends finally came back, and he's like, well, you know, but this guy writes about wine, and, you know, cops were actually very cool. they kind of realized they shouldn't have done that. So they got out of their squad car. They were like, all right, kid, this is what you do. You go down, your appearance is going to be in like 2 months. You go down, you plead guilty, you pay a $35 fine. It's not going to go on your record. I'm like, okay. So they gave me back the bottle, and I have the summons. And the rest of that night, I found my friends, and I'm like posing with the bottle and the summons, like, hey, like, look, I'm a criminal, this is awesome. And think about it, if you're ever going to be caught on the street and have to go to criminal court, to have a 40-year-old bottle of Bordeaux, I mean, that's like a great thing. And I was thinking, I'm not going to plead guilty. This is my first truly tweetable opportunity. Finally, something to give social media that actually is good. So I decided to go down to the court months later, because it takes some time to work through the system, and plead not guilty. And I went down there, and I went down with my book. And by the way, I just got the transcript of this exchange. It's like truth is stranger than fiction. So I knew if I didn't get the actual transcript, some people wouldn't believe this. So I brought the book, I had my empty bottle of 70 Palmer, and I go through the metal detector. They're like, you can't take the bottle upstairs. I'm like, but it's evidence. They're like, no. So they made me check the bottle at the metal detector. They put a little sticker on it. I go up to the courtroom, and it's a huge, dark, dank New York City courtroom. It's a special court where it's like quality of life violators, people who have urinated on the sidewalk. I'm not kidding. Reckless drivers. I mean, it was all these hangdog guys, and they put you in this pen and they assign a lawyer to you on the spot and at the lectern. So the judge calls me after about 15 minutes. He's a retired judge, kind of white hair, hoary guy, leaning back in his chair. And he's like, okay, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I'm a wine writer. He's like, you what? And the attorney they assigned to me is like, Your Honor, he said he's a wine writer. And the judge just looked at me kind of like cross-eyed. Like, he's like, and by the way, this is verbatim, and I'm going to put the transcript on my website soon. He's like, let me get this straight. You go around all day drinking wine and then writing about it? I'm like, yeah, I guess so. He pauses. Where do I get a job like that? I'm about to retire, and I really need a job like that. And then we were off and running. The merits of the case didn't matter. All we were talking about, he wanted to know how much wine I had drunk in a day. When is wine ageable? He's like, oh, you wrote a book? Let's see it. He's paging through the book. He's like, oh, this looks good. This looks really good. And in a moment of generosity, I'm just like, listen, I have many copies. You can absolutely keep that one. And the bailiff was like, don't say that. That's bribing the judge. So needless to say, he was cool about it, and it was case dismissed, and I am no longer a criminal. But when you see it online, it's really cool. It's like people, people of New York versus Mark Oldman, all over a bottle of 1970 Bordeaux. So it's a crazy life, and I thank you very much for having me talk here.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was great. Very informative. We're going to move on to the State of the Petite Sirah Grape Address. And for that, our longtime friend, Dan Berger, will be giving that. He's our first panelist. He has been a wine columnist since 1976 and has resided in Sonoma County since 1986. Today, in addition to his privately published weekly wine commentary, Dan Berger's Vintage Experiences, Dan writes a nationally syndicated wine column for Creators Syndicate, as well as articles for Decanter, Robb Report, Cheers, Beverage Dynamics, and numerous other publications. He was the full-time wine columnist and reporter for the Los Angeles Times from 1988 to 1996. His Los Angeles Times column was carried nationally by the Los Angeles Times, Washington Post News Service. And during that time, he commuted from Sonoma County to Los Angeles so he could maintain his residence and affiliation in the wine country. Dan is a judge at many wine competitions, including numerous shows in Australia, as well as competitions in Slovenia, Belgium, and across the United States, judging at least a dozen competitions each year. He also coordinates 2 wine competitions in California. Please welcome Dan Berger.
Thank you, John. I'm not going to stand up because I'm too old for that. It was 1985, roughly November. I was driving through actually Carmel Valley, and it was late, needed dinner. My wife and I stopped at a little cafe and looked at the wine list, and as usual at that period of time in the United States, there were no vintages on the wine list, but there was a Petite Sirah listed, and I said, gee, it's probably got to have a little bit of age on it. So I said, what's the vintage? And she said, I have no clue. She brought the wine out. It was 1977 Mirasu. And so the wine was 8 years old already and was still marked in price exactly what it was marked when the wine was released. So I figured, why not? We'll try it. And it was fabulous. So about 3 months later, in early 1986, which marks the 25th anniversary of that date right now, I came up with a column that I wrote for my syndicated column. And I was writing 3 wine columns a week at that time. When you're writing 3 wine columns a week,